We escaped the Antarctic facility, but the infection is still following us by Pentyworth 223. If you're reading this, it means I didn't run fast enough. I thought destroying the facility would be the end of it, that we'd buried it beneath the ice where it belonged. I was wrong. Specimen Z14 didn't die down there. It learned, and now it's following us. The hum of the plane's engines was the only sound as we flew through the endless night. Outside the window, the Antarctic expanse stretched into nothingness, illuminated only by the faint reflection of moonlight on snow. Sarah sat across from me, staring at the floor with her arms wrapped tightly around herself. Neither of us had spoken since the explosion. My mind kept replaying the moment we left the facility. The blinding flash, the shockwave shaking the plane, the black tendrils pressing against the elevator doors as we escaped. I wanted to believe it was over, but deep down, I knew better. "Do you think anyone will believe us?" Sarah asked suddenly, her voice hoarse. I didn't answer right away. I'd asked myself the same question a dozen times since we took off. Even if we survived, what could we say? That we'd found intelligent bacteria in the ice? That it tried to communicate with us before breaking free and consuming the facility? No, I admitted finally. But that doesn't mean we're safe. Sarah glanced up, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion. "You think it got out, don't you?" I hesitated. I wanted to tell her no, that the explosion had destroyed everything. But the memory of those symbols burned in my mind. The spirals, the eyes, the patterns that had grown more deliberate as specimen Z14 evolved. It hadn't just been trying to survive. It had been learning. "I don't know," I said quietly. "But I don't think this is over." The plane landed in Ushuaia, Argentina, the southernmost city in the world. We barely spoke as we disembarked, stepping into the biting wind that swept through the snow-covered streets. The research organization that had funded our expedition had arranged a safe house, a small apartment near the harbor. Sarah dropped her bag by the door and sank onto the couch, rubbing her hands over her face. I stood by the window, staring at the distant mountains and listening to the faint hum of city life outside. "We need to tell someone," Sarah said after a long silence. "Tell them what?" I asked without turning around. "That we accidentally released an alien bacteria that almost turned us into meat puppets?" She didn't answer, and the weight of the unspoken hung heavy between us. I wanted to believe that blowing up the facility had solved the problem. But even as I tried to convince myself, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed us out of the ice. That night, I dreamed of the Red Room. I stood in the center of the lab, surrounded by darkness. The shattered containment chamber lay at my feet, black tendrils spilling across the floor. I could hear something breathing, slow, wet, and heavy. The symbols were everywhere, glowing faintly in the air like fragments of a forgotten language. It wasn't supposed to end like this, I thought. Something moved behind me, and I turned just as a figure stepped out of the shadows. It was Lynn. His blackened eyes stared through me as the veins beneath his skin pulsed with faint light. His mouth opened, but no words came out, just a low, wet hiss that echoed through the darkness. I tried to move, but my body wouldn't respond. The black tendrils coiled around my legs, pulling me downward as the symbols burned brighter and brighter. I woke up with a gasp, my chest heaving as sweat soaked through my shirt. The room was dark, but I could hear the faint sound of Sarah's breathing from the other room. My heart pounded as I sat up, trying to shake the lingering images from my mind. Then I saw the window. Faint patterns of frost had formed on the glass, spirals, branching lines, and a single crude eye that seemed to stare back at me. Morning brought no comfort. I stood by the window, staring at the frost patterns until the rising sun melted them away. By the time Sarah woke, I'd already packed my bag. "We need to leave," I said without preamble. Sarah blinked at me, still groggy from sleep. "What are you talking about?" "It's not over," I said. "I saw the symbols last night on the window. It's still out there, Sarah. It's following us." She paled, her hands clenching into fists. "That's impossible. We destroyed it. The explosion—" "Didn't stop it," I interrupted. "It learned from us, adapted, it found a way out." Sarah shook her head, but I could see the fear behind her eyes. Part of her already knew I was right. "Where do we go?" she asked quietly. "Somewhere far from here," I said. "Somewhere cold. It thrives in heat. We need to stay ahead of it." We left Ushuaia that afternoon, driving north along winding mountain roads that cut through the snow-covered peaks. The air grew warmer as we descended from the mountains, and I couldn't shake the sense that something was closing in behind us. It started with small things, patches of frost forming on the windows, even as the air outside warmed. The faint sound of something wet and heavy moving just beyond the edge of hearing. Dreams filled with spirals, eyes, and the rhythmic hum that seemed to echo through my skull. 3 days into the drive, we stopped at a roadside motel somewhere in Patagonia. The air was warm and damp, heavy with the scent of rain. I stood outside the motel room, smoking a cigarette and watching the distant mountains fade into the dusk. That's when I saw the first one. It stood at the edge of the parking lot, half hidden by the shadows of the trees. Its skin was pale and mottled, black veins visible beneath the surface. Its eyes, dark, empty holes, locked onto mine as its mouth opened in a soundless hiss. "Sarah!" I shouted, stumbling backward as the creature lunged forward. The motel door burst open behind me as Sarah rushed outside. Her eyes went wide when she saw the creature. "Get inside!" I shouted, shoving her back into the room and slamming the door shut. The creature hit the door a moment later, the wood shaking beneath the impact. Its wet, ragged breathing echoed through the thin walls as I grabbed the chair and wedged it beneath the handle. "Mark, what the hell is that?" Sarah gasped, her voice high with panic. "It's them," I said, my own voice shaking. "It followed us." The creature slammed against the door again, harder this time. I grabbed the crowbar from my bag and took a deep breath. "We're not gonna die here," I said, gripping the crowbar tighter. "We've come too far." The creature struck the motel door again, the wood splintering beneath the force of its blows. Its ragged breathing filled the air, thick with the wet, organic sound that had haunted my dreams since Facility Thule. "We have to go, now," I shouted, grabbing Sarah's arm and pulling her toward the window. "Wait, what if there's more of them?" she gasped, her eyes darting wildly as the door shuttered behind us. "Then we're dead if we stay here." Without waiting for a response, I shoved the window open and climbed through, my boots hitting the wet pavement outside. The rain had started falling harder, a steady downpour that soaked through my jacket as I helped Sarah through the window. The creature shrieked from inside the motel room, its voice a twisted echo of something once human. I grabbed Sarah's hand and ran, our footsteps splashing through puddles as we sprinted across the parking lot toward the car. I could hear it behind us, claws scraping against wood, glass shattering as it tore through the window frame. "Come on, come on!" I yanked the driver's side door open and scrambled inside, fumbling with the keys as Sarah climbed into the passenger seat. The creature burst from the motel, moving faster than anything that size should have been able to. Its pale, twisted form glistened in the rain, black veins pulsing beneath translucent skin. I caught a glimpse of its eyes, empty, black voids that seemed to drink in the light, and slammed the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life just as the creature lunged forward, slamming into the side of the car with enough force to rock it on its axles. Sarah screamed as its claws raked across the passenger window, leaving deep gouges in the glass. "Hold on!" I shouted, throwing the car into gear and slamming my foot down on the accelerator. The tires screeched against the wet pavement as we sped out of the parking lot, the creature chasing after us with terrifying speed. I could see it in the rearview mirror, its pale form illuminated by the red glow of the taillights as it sprinted through the rain. "Faster!" Sarah shouted. "I'm trying!" The road ahead twisted sharply as we merged onto the highway, headlights reflecting off the rain-slick asphalt. The creature's footsteps echoed in the distance, fading as we picked up speed. I didn't slow down until its silhouette disappeared into the shadows behind us, swallowed by the night. Only then did I realize how hard I was shaking. Hours passed before I finally pulled over on a deserted stretch of road, the car idling as I gripped the steering wheel with white-knuckled hands. My pulse pounded in my ears, the adrenaline still surging through my veins. Sarah sat beside me, her breath ragged and uneven as she wiped the rain from her face. Neither of us spoke for a long time. "It's still following us," she whispered eventually. I nodded, unable to deny the truth. The bacteria had survived the destruction of Facility Thule. Somehow it had adapted, and now it was hunting us. We can't keep running forever, I said, staring into the darkness beyond the windshield. We need to find someone who can help us. Who? Sarah asked, her voice strained. No one's going to believe us, Mark. There might be someone. I hesitated, my mind racing as I considered the possibility that had been nagging at me since the moment we escaped the facility. Not everyone had died in the explosion, at least not everyone we knew about, but there had been whispers of another survivor, someone who had vanished before the final breach. Victor Reyes, I said, meeting Sarah's gaze. The operations manager, he disappeared the night before the breach. If anyone knows how the bacteria escaped, it's him. Sarah frowned. How do you know he's still alive? I don't. But if there's even a chance he is, we need to find him. Finding Reyes wasn't going to be easy. The organization behind Facility Thule, Ashen Blade Industries, had covered their tracks well, and we had no idea where Reyes had gone after the breach. But I still had one lead: the encrypted communications network we'd used during the expedition. We stopped at a roadside diner an hour later, the neon sign buzzing faintly in the rain-soaked night. The place was nearly empty, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows over the worn-out booths. I slid into a seat near the back, pulling my laptop from my bag as Sarah sat across from me. Are you sure this is a good idea? She asked, glancing nervously toward the front windows. No, but it's the only idea we've got. Booting up the laptop, I bypassed the system's standard security protocols and accessed the encrypted network. Most of the channels were dead, wiped clean after the facility's destruction, but one private server still showed activity. Victor Reyes, I said, meeting Sarah's gaze. The operations manager, he disappeared the night before the breach. If anyone knows how the bacteria escaped, it's him. Sarah frowned. How do you know he's still alive? I don't. But if there's even a chance he is, we need to find him. Finding Reyes wasn't going to be easy. The organization behind Facility Thule, Ashen Blade Industries, had covered their tracks well, and we had no idea where Reyes had gone after the breach. But I still had one lead: the encrypted communications network we'd used during the expedition. We stopped at a roadside diner an hour later, the neon sign buzzing faintly in the rain-soaked night. The place was nearly empty, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows over the worn-out booths. I slid into a seat near the back, pulling my laptop from my bag as Sarah sat across from me. Are you sure this is a good idea? She asked, glancing nervously toward the front windows. No, but it's the only idea we've got. Booting up the laptop, I bypassed the system's standard security protocols and accessed the encrypted network. Most of the channels were dead, wiped clean after the facility's destruction, but one private server still showed activity. Victor Reyes, I said, meeting Sarah's gaze. The operations manager, he disappeared the night before the breach. If anyone knows how the bacteria escaped, it's him. Sarah frowned. How do you know he's still alive? I don't. But if there's even a chance he is, we need to find him. Finding Reyes wasn't going to be easy. The organization behind Facility Thule, Ashen Blade Industries, had covered their tracks well, and we had no idea where Reyes had gone after the breach. But I still had one lead: the encrypted communications network we'd used during the expedition. We stopped at a roadside diner an hour later, the neon sign buzzing faintly in the rain-soaked night. The place was nearly empty, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows over the worn-out booths. I slid into a seat near the back, pulling my laptop from my bag as Sarah sat across from me. Are you sure this is a good idea? She asked, glancing nervously toward the front windows. No, but it's the only idea we've got. Booting up the laptop, I bypassed the system's standard security protocols and accessed the encrypted network. Most of the channels were dead, wiped clean after the facility's destruction, but one private server still showed activity. Then from the depths of the glacier, a figure emerged. It wasn't one of the creatures, it was Victor Reyes. Reyes stepped forward cautiously, his breath clouding the air as he approached us. His face was gaunt, eyes sunken from exhaustion, but there was a fierce determination in his gaze. He wore a heavy coat lined with fur, his boots crunching against the frozen ground as he stopped a few feet away. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, his voice rough from the cold. "We didn't have a choice," I replied. "The bacteria followed us. It's still out there." Reyes nodded grimly. "I know. It's adapting faster than we anticipated. The explosion at Facility Thule slowed it down, but it wasn't enough." "How did you survive?" Sarah asked, her voice tight with fear and anger. "I left before the breach," Reyes admitted. "I knew containment was failing and I couldn't stop it alone. I've been tracking the organism ever since, trying to understand its patterns, its limits, but it's stronger than we thought, smarter." He paused, glancing toward the distant peaks where the glaciers vanished into shadow. "And it's not just following you," he continued. "It's looking for something, a place where it can spread beyond control." "Why here?" I asked. Reyes turned to face me, his expression grave. "Because this is where it came from." I stared at him, my pulse hammering in my chest. "You're saying the bacteria originated here, in the glaciers?" "Not just the glaciers," Reyes replied. "Beneath them." The wind howled through the glaciers, carrying with it the faint, rhythmic hum that had haunted my dreams since Facility Thule. The sound seemed to pulse through my bones, vibrating in time with the faint tremors beneath the ice. "We don't have much time," Reyes said, his breath clouding the air. "If it's found us here, it won't stop until it consumes everything." "What is it looking for?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. Reyes glanced toward the distant mountains, his eyes hard. "A way out. Specimen Z14 was dormant for millions of years, sealed beneath the ice. But it's not just trying to survive, it's trying to spread. And if it reaches the warmer climates beyond the glaciers..." He didn't finish the sentence, he didn't have to. I tightened my grip on the crowbar in my hand. "Then we need to stop it before that happens. Where do we start?" Reyes hesitated, then motioned for us to follow. "There's an old research station built into the ice, abandoned decades ago. It was the first facility to encounter the bacteria. If we can reach it, we might find what we need to destroy it for good." Sarah glanced at me, her eyes wide with fear and determination. I gave her a small nod, and together we followed Reyes into the heart of the glacier. The journey into the glacier was treacherous. We descended through narrow ice tunnels, the walls shimmering with frost that glowed faintly beneath our flashlights. The air grew colder with every step, each breath crystallizing in the air as we navigated the labyrinth of frozen corridors. The deeper we went, the stronger the hum became. A low, bone-deep vibration that seemed to come from the ice itself. I could feel it resonating through my chest, growing louder with each step. "It knows we're here," Reyes muttered, his voice barely audible over the hum. "How much farther?" Sarah asked, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "Not far," Reyes replied. "We're almost there." We rounded a corner and emerged into a cavernous chamber carved from the ice. The walls glistened with frost, reflecting the faint glow of ancient equipment embedded in the walls. Rusted consoles and broken monitors lay scattered across the floor, their screens dark with age. In the center of the chamber stood a massive steel hatch, half buried in the ice. Faint symbols had been etched into the metal. Spirals, branching lines, and the crude shapes of eyes that seemed to watch us as we approached. "This is it," Reyes said, stepping forward. "The original containment facility. If there's any chance of stopping the bacteria, it's down there." Sarah hesitated beside me, her fingers tightening around the strap of her bag. "Are you sure this is a good idea? What if we're just waking it up again?" "It's already awake," I said. "We don't have a choice." Reyes placed his hand against the hatch, his fingers tracing the symbols etched into the metal. Then, with a deep breath, he gripped the rusted wheel and began to turn. The hatch groaned as it opened, releasing a rush of cold air that smelled of ice and something older. Something wrong. The hum grew louder, vibrating through the floor beneath our feet as we stepped through the doorway and into the darkness beyond. The corridor beyond the hatch was narrow and steep, descending deeper into the ice. The walls were rough and uneven, carved directly from the glacier itself. Strange patterns of frost clung to the walls, spirals, latticework, and faint outlines of eyes that seemed to blink and shift as we passed. My heart pounded in my chest as we moved deeper into the glacier, the air growing colder with every step. The hum was louder now, reverberating through my skull like a second heartbeat. "Stay close," Reyes whispered, his voice barely audible above the noise. We emerged into a massive chamber carved from solid ice. The ceiling stretched high above us, disappearing into shadows, while the walls were lined with ancient machinery, rusted consoles, broken monitors, and cables that vanished into the ice. In the center of the chamber stood a massive containment vessel, half buried in frost. The steel surface was scarred and pitted with age, but the symbols etched into the metal still glowed faintly. Spirals, branching lines, and the unblinking eyes of specimen Z-14. Reyes approached the vessel cautiously, his breath fogging the air as he wiped frost from the control panel. The hum grew louder as he activated the ancient machinery, the screens flickering to life with distorted images and garbled data. "This is where it began," he said quietly. "Long before Facility Thula, the bacteria was contained here, sealed beneath the ice where it couldn't spread." Sarah stepped closer, her eyes wide with fear. "But it escaped." Reyes nodded grimly. "The ice is melting faster than we thought. If we don't stop it here, it will spread across the world." I stepped forward, my breath fogging the air as I examined the ancient machinery. The control panel was a maze of rusted switches and broken screens, but one thing was clear: the containment system was failing. "We need to overload the system," I said, "collapse the glacier and bury the bacteria for good." Reyes hesitated, his eyes dark with uncertainty. "If we do that, there's no going back. This entire place will come down on top of us." "We don't have a choice," Sarah said firmly. "If we let it escape, it'll spread across the world." I took a deep breath, my fingers hovering over the control panel. The machinery hummed beneath my touch, the ancient systems groaning as they struggled to reactivate. "Once I start the sequence, we'll have 10 minutes to get out," I said, meeting Reyes's gaze. "After that, there's no turning back." He nodded, stepping back as I began inputting the override commands. The hum grew louder, vibrating through the floor as the containment vessel began to tremble. Frost cracked and splintered from the walls, falling in shards as the chamber began to shake. Suddenly, a low, wet hiss echoed through the air. I froze, my pulse hammering in my chest as I turned toward the source of the sound. From the shadows at the edge of the chamber, a figure emerged, twisted and inhuman, its pale skin glistening with frost and black veins that pulsed with faint light. Its eyes were empty voids, and its mouth opened in a soundless scream as it lunged toward us. "Run!" Reyes shouted, raising his flare gun and firing. The flare struck the creature's chest, engulfing it in a burst of red light, but it didn't stop. Its skin sizzled and blackened, but it kept coming, claws raking through the air as it lunged toward me. I dove aside, rolling across the ice as the creature crashed into the control panel. Sparks erupted from the machinery, and the entire chamber shuddered as the countdown began. 10 minutes remaining. "Get to the surface," I shouted, scrambling to my feet. Sarah and Reyes sprinted toward the corridor, but the creature blocked my path, its empty eyes locked onto mine as it lunged forward. I raised the crowbar, swinging with all my strength. The metal connected with a sickening crunch, but the creature barely flinched. Its claws raked across my shoulder, pain lancing through my arm as I stumbled backward. 9:30. "Mark!" Sarah screamed from the corridor. I gritted my teeth, gripping the crowbar tighter as I faced the creature. Its breath reeked of decay and frost, its black veins pulsing with unnatural light as it advanced. "I won't let you win," I growled through clenched teeth. The creature lunged and I swung again, this time aiming for its legs. The crowbar connected with a wet crack and the creature collapsed to the floor. Seizing my chance, I sprinted past it and into the corridor, my shoulder throbbing with pain as I ran. The glacier trembled around us, cracks spreading through the walls as the countdown continued. The air was filled with the sound of grinding ice and distant, inhuman shrieks as more creatures stirred in the depths of the glacier. 5 minutes remaining. "Faster!" Reyes shouted, leading the way through the narrow tunnels. Frost fell from the ceiling in jagged shards, and the ground buckled beneath our feet as the glacier began to collapse. Sarah stumbled beside me, her breath ragged as she clutched her side. I grabbed her arm, pulling her forward as the tunnel began to cave in behind us. 2 minutes remaining. We reached the steel hatch at the entrance to the facility, but it was half buried in ice. The metal warped from the pressure of the collapsing glacier. Reyes grabbed the wheel and began to turn, his muscles straining as the ice cracked and groaned around us. Come on, Sarah shouted. The hatch burst open just as the ceiling collapsed, and we scrambled through the doorway and into the open air. The ground trembled beneath our feet as the glacier began to sink, fissures opening in the ice as the ancient facility crumbled into darkness. 30 seconds remaining, we ran. The air was filled with the deafening roar of collapsing ice, the shockwave knocking us to the ground as we reached the edge of the glacier. I grabbed Sarah and Reyes, pulling them forward as the final explosion erupted beneath us. 0. The world vanished in a blinding flash of light. When I opened my eyes, I was lying on my back in the snow. The air was still and cold, the distant mountains illuminated by the pale light of dawn. My body ached with exhaustion, but I forced myself to sit up, scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. Sarah lay beside me, her breath visible in the frigid air as she stirred. Reyes stood nearby, staring out over the remains of the glacier. The ice had collapsed into a massive crater, steam rising from the shattered ground where the ancient facility had once stood. Is it over? Sarah whispered. I didn't answer. I wanted to believe we had succeeded, that the explosion had destroyed Specimen Z-14 once and for all. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't the end. Reyes turned toward us, his eyes dark with exhaustion. We've bought the world some time, he said quietly, but it's not over. Not yet. I glanced toward the horizon, where the first light of dawn touched the distant peaks. The air was still and silent, but somewhere beneath the ice I could still hear the faint echo of a heartbeat, waiting. Weeks later, after we'd parted ways with Reyes and gone into hiding, I found myself standing at the window of a small cabin deep in the mountains. Snow fell softly outside, blanketing the world in white silence. But as I stared at the frost forming on the glass, my breath caught in my throat. There, etched into the ice, was a spiral.